Have you ever felt a chill run down your spine when you hear a distant train whistle, even though you know there are no tracks nearby? Have you ever felt a cold spot pass right through you as if a phantom just moved past you? Tonight, we will talk about places forgotten by time, places reclaimed by nature, places where the echoes of life have not yet faded, abandoned railways. We journey into the heart of darkness, to the abandoned tracks where the veil between our world and the next wears thin, where whispers of forgotten tragedies echo in the wind and the spectral glow of headlights pierces the veil of night. These are the stories of the phantom passengers, the forlorn conductors, and the trains that never reach their destinations. This is Three Ghost Trains, abandoned tracks that still echo with life. Our first tale takes us deep into the American heartland, to a desolate stretch of track known only as the Devil's Pass Line. Closed in the late 1800s after a series of fatal accidents, the Devil's Pass Line has been swallowed by nature, the rusting tracks a haunting reminder of a bygone era. Locals whisper of a phantom train, a spectral locomotive that races along the old Devil's Pass Line. The train is always seen at night, its headlight a baleful glow cutting through the darkness. Some say the train is filled with the spirits of those who died on that line, their souls unable to find peace. One night, a group of teenagers decided to spend the night telling scary stories near the abandoned Devil's Pass Line. As the night wore on and the stories grew scarier, the teens started to hear a faint sound in the distance. It was a low rumble at first, almost like thunder, but as it grew closer, they realized with horror what it was. The sound of a train whistle pierced the night, echoing through the valley. Terrified, the teens scrambled to their feet, their blood turning to ice as the sound of the approaching train grew louder and louder. They could see it now, a massive black locomotive, its headlight a single, malevolent eye bearing down on them. They ran, their hearts pounding in their chests as the train roared past their position. The force of the train blew past them, knocking them to the ground. They lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, their ears still ringing from the sound of the whistle. When they finally got to their feet, they saw that the train was gone, vanished as quickly as it had appeared. They were never able to explain what they had seen that night, but they knew one thing for sure: it was no ordinary train. Some things are better left undisturbed, some places better left unexplored. But for those brave enough to seek out the truth, the Devil's Pass Line offers a glimpse into the heart of darkness. Our journey takes us north to the icy grip of the Canadian Rockies, where a tale is told of the Midnight Spectre, a ghost train said to haunt the abandoned tracks of the old White Pass route. Once a lifeline for miners and settlers, the White Pass route is now a desolate landscape, where the wind howls like a banshee and the snow falls relentlessly. Legend has it that the Midnight Spectre is the ghost of a train that derailed one cold winter night, sending its passengers into the icy depths of a ravine. The train is said to reappear every year on the anniversary of the tragedy, its spectral whistle a mournful cry in the night. One night, a lone truck driver found himself stranded on a deserted stretch of highway near the abandoned White Pass route. The snow was coming down hard, and the wind was howling like a wild animal. He knew he had to find shelter, and fast. He spotted a small cabin in the distance and decided to take his chances. As he approached the cabin, he noticed something strange. There were train tracks running right alongside the cabin. The tracks were covered in snow, but he could see that they were old and rusted. He thought it was strange, but he didn't think much of it. He knocked on the door of the cabin, but there was no answer. The door was unlocked, so he let himself in. The cabin was small and sparsely furnished, but it was warm and dry. He decided to wait out the storm there. He had just settled in when he heard it, the sound of a train whistle. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He cautiously made his way to the window and peered out into the darkness. That's when he saw it. A train was slowly making its way along the tracks, its headlight cutting through the falling snow. He watched in stunned silence as the train pulled up to the cabin and came to a stop. He could see the ghostly figures of passengers sitting in the windows, their faces pale and gaunt. The conductor stepped off the train and turned towards the cabin. He was tall and skeletal, and his eyes glowed an eerie red. The truck driver stumbled back from the window in terror, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the conductor's footsteps approaching the cabin door. He grabbed his things and ran to the back door, throwing it open and running out into the storm. He didn't stop running until he reached his truck. He finally got the door open and jumped inside, starting the engine and pulling away as fast as he could. He never looked back, but he could hear the sound of the train whistle echoing in his ears long after he had left the cabin behind. Some say the midnight spectre is a harbinger of doom, while others believe it is merely a lost soul searching for peace. Our final destination takes us south to the swamps and bayous of Louisiana, where the air is thick with humidity and the Spanish moss hangs heavy from the trees. It is here, amidst the tangled vines and murky waters, that we find the legend of the haunted locomotive, a phantom train said to roam the abandoned tracks of the old Baton Rouge and Opelousas Railroad. The story of the haunted locomotive begins in the late 1800s when a train carrying a load of passengers and valuable cargo was caught in a flash flood. The train derailed and everyone on board perished. The wreckage was never recovered, and the train is said to reappear every year on the anniversary of the disaster, its whistle a mournful wail in the night. One humid summer night, a group of friends decided to go ghost hunting in the swamps near the abandoned Baton Rouge and Opelousas Railroad. They had heard the stories of the haunted locomotive, and they were determined to see it for themselves. They piled into their car and drove out to the swamps, parking their car at the edge of the woods and setting off on foot into the darkness. The swamp was alive with the sounds of insects and animals, and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying vegetation. The friends made their way through the undergrowth, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They had been walking for about an hour when they came to a clearing. In the middle of the clearing were the abandoned train tracks. The tracks were overgrown with weeds and vines, and the rails were rusted and twisted. The friends could hear the sound of water running nearby, and they knew they must be close to the river. They decided to follow the tracks, hoping they would lead them to the river. They had been walking along the tracks for about 15 minutes when they heard it. A low rumble in the distance, like the sound of thunder. They stopped in their tracks, listening intently. The rumble grew louder, and the friends soon realized what it was. It was the sound of a train approaching. They exchanged nervous glances, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew there were no trains that ran through these parts anymore. They watched in terror as a train emerged from the darkness, its headlight cutting through the mist. The train was old and rusty, and it looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The train screeched to a halt in front of them, its brakes squealing. The friends stood there, frozen in fear, as a figure emerged from the train's engine. It was the conductor, and he was unlike anything they had ever seen before. He was tall and skeletal, with glowing red eyes and a long white beard. He was wearing a tattered conductor's uniform, and he was carrying a lantern that cast eerie shadows all around him. The conductor stepped off the train and slowly approached the friends, his eyes fixed on them. The friends were paralyzed with fear. They had never seen anything so terrifying in their lives. They wanted to run, but they couldn't move. They could only watch in horror as the conductor approached them, his skeletal hand reaching out towards them. The Phantom Express, the Midnight Spectre, and the haunted locomotive 3 ghost trains, each with its own tragic story. Are they just stories, or are they something more? Something to send shivers down your spine as you lie awake at night, listening to the sounds of the night, wondering if you too will encounter one of these trains on your journey. Have you ever had a ghostly encounter on an abandoned track or lonely stretch of highway? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed tonight's journey into the heart of darkness, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next descent into the unknown. Sleep well, if you can.